Welcome, 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 YouTube. We are back for another Saturday. I'm excited to be here. This box that we're going to cover today, Buff, is an easy box from Egotistical SW, Sean Wharton, part of the HackTheBox content development and distribution team. He does a great job. He's running the Dante lab for right now, but this is another easy box that he's put out there for the whole community to just take a look at. There's not a lot to this one. It's very CVE oriented. There's public exploits out there. What we're going to go through today is looking at those exploits, modifying them a little bit. What happens every single time that I do one of these videos? When I originally exploit the box, everything works. And then by the time that they retire, I have upgraded a system, upgraded an entire VM, upgraded my Python, whatever it is. I run into all kinds of conflicts. So instead of showing you guys how to use older libraries with your system, what I want to do here is just show you what I do, which is just a down and dirty, porting a 2.7 to a Python 3 format, and usually it's reformatting print. In this case, there's a couple other things that we're going to hit where it's just little nitnoid intricacies when you go from Python 2.7 to Python 3. So I'll cover a little bit of that, but as you see here, there's going to be a CVE on a gym management software that's out there, and it's going to get us remote code execution. Really cool shell, Boku shell, made by Bobby Cook. I really had a good time talking to that guy, and I could see that, you know, he goes after a lot of these kind of small programs that are out there running, but does a great job of making a cool shell here that we can use. And I'm going to show you how to modify the shell to get it working again in Python 3. From there, we'll go ahead and bridge over to a netcat listener just so that we can get a more stable shell. Work on forwarding. So we're going to do some port forwarding. As you see through some of our enumeration, there's going to be one port that's vulnerable, and that is going to be that other CVE for CloudMe. So it's a privilege escalation on the local box. We're going to go ahead and forward that port back to our box and then go after it and exploit it. Doesn't take a lot of tools here. So you're going to look at the browser. You're going to need some kind of Python, whether you want to go with 2.7 and get the right libraries, or if you want to go with 3 and modify the program. You also need msfvenom, because we're going to need to make one quick payload, and there's a couple different ways that you can handle that as well. I'm going to show you the fastest way for me at this point in time. And then, like I said before, WinPs, or in this case, you can do the exact same thing. I'm going to show you how to do it with netstat and tasklist. Those are the two programs that are going to kind of give you the feel for what this box does, but it was really hard to enumerate anything beyond the port and the program. All right. So with that, let's get started. So as always, we'll start with an Nmap. We'll do 10.10.10.198. And then I'll just leave it on the normal 1000. The first thing you're going to run into is that it does not accept ping requests, ping probes. So we're going to go ahead and skip the host discovery. We're going to let it run. It takes a little minute. But the first thing you see pop up is that port 8080. So in this case, normally 8080 is a proxy. But we'll go ahead and take a look at the web page because it is serving HTTP content. So 10.10.10.198, 8080. You start to see it's Mr. Ben's Bro Hut. Mr. Ben's Bro Hut is a gym. So it's all about fitness. So running projectworlds.in, copyrighted website. We'll take a look at page source. So as usual, I like to scan through, check the page source. Nothing cool there. Let's take a look at robots. Object not found on the server. We do see that it's Apache 2443. It says Win64 OpenSSL PHP. So we got some information on the box right there. Comes back in the C data tag. Okay, that's something. We'll come back to this page. Let's see what we got. There is an email and a password sign in here. I'm not gonna mess around with this because it's not what I found to get into the box. So this talks about some of the packages, some of the information. This tab tells you a little bit about the facilities. You have an About tab that just tells the objectives, visions, facilities, kind of same thing. And then you go to Contact. There's no actual way to contact them. So this is kind of that first indicator that something's off a little bit. Nothing is hiding in this code. When you go back and you look at the main page, it says made using Gym Management Software 1.0. So we'll just go ahead and do a copy, open a new tab, paste it in, just Google search the thing. So Gym Management Software 1.0. And you start to see there's a bunch of exploits popping up. Authentication bypass, there's a SQL injection. We're going to skip right through it and we're going to go to the unauthenticated remote code execution. So this is somebody I follow, Bobby Cook, great guy. If you got a chance, add him to your social media. He does a lot of these smaller programs. So this program was released and he and some of his friends will go after these for any kind of RCE, CVEs they can find. It's a little bit of a complicated process, but he generates a pseudo terminal by polling the box, bringing it back through this echo shell, and puts it into a nice format with a terminal prompt with your command or your current working directory, and then whatever other text you've got. So we're going to play around with this one a little bit to see if we can get remote code execution on this box. I'm going to go ahead and view the raw. I like to do it this way sometimes, so let's take a look at the box. So I have my directories where I keep this stuff at. And we'll just do a wget, paste this in. There's a couple different ways that you can copy it in with a output file name, things like that, but I'm okay with just going ahead and going back and renaming these. So it's Python, but if I try to run Python 4856, it's going to say there's no module named request. And there is. If you go through here, you look, there is a module call request for Python 3. But when you're running Python 2.7, which is what this one was stated, if you come back here, it does say they're running 2717. You run into some issues. And I had some issues with versioning. There's ways to use PyEnvironment to set up a couple different ways, and that might be the best option in the long run, but for me, I like to get kind of little dirty port and just do the basics to get it running, but not optimize for Python 3 by any means. Don't take that as this is the way that you should rewrite programs, but it is enough to get the programs up and running when you're dealing with exploits other people have written. So I'm going to try and import this into Python 3. So the first thing you need to do is try and run it and see what kind of errors you get. And this is the most common thing I get whenever I try to run something as Python 3, which is the way that print was converted. Before you could just print with no other syntax, but here it even calls it out. It says, did you mean print parentheses, all this information, parentheses. So it's just a matter of the syntax is different for print. All right, so let's go ahead and nano this file. And we're going to look for the references to print. So this is the line in question right here. So we'll go ahead and just add some parentheses and keep going down. This one, oddly, this one does have parentheses, so that works. But that one's got parentheses, that one's got parentheses. Come down here, header doesn't have parentheses, even though it's trying to print the output of a function. You still got to put that around, as well as these format help blocks. put one right here. And that is all the print. So we'll exit out of this and we'll try and run it again. Well, that seemed to work okay. Let's try and run it against the box. So HTTP 10, 10, 10, 198, and it's gonna be 8080. And I'm gonna show you a little trick here. It shows it right here where you have to have the end slash. If I end this without a slash, it's going to try and run it and it's going to hit this massive error because what it's looking for is the upload file that exists at this website, but you need to make sure that there's a slash on the end. So I'll go ahead and just put a slash here. Clear the window. And here is the web shell. But is it? One of the things it says is successfully connected, and then it says exiting. So we'll go back and take a look. And there's a try except block here. So we're going to try everything in this window. And then anytime there's an exception, we're just going to say exiting. And I went through here. This is where it says successfully connected to web shell. So somewhere between here and here, there's an error. And I put little breakpoints, basically little print debug statements. But the issue comes down to this. Another function of what changed between 2.7 and 3 in Python was they renamed it. So the raw input is now just input. And so making that small adjustment, you'll see that it's able to take that input and generate it into a web shell. Maybe. And there's our web shell. Took a little bit long time. Today has not been my friend when it comes to the demo gods. I've tried to get this video going a few times, and this box is a little quirky. So just keep that in mind. Don't let it get you down. The steps that you see here, you should be able to follow, and it'll work. So we'll go ahead and look at the directory. That looks good. We'll do a who am I? I am Sean. Okay, let's do a cd users. It doesn't really work because we're sitting in this weird pseudo shell. It doesn't, like if I do a cd ... it may work, but no, it doesn't work. So the first thing we need to do is bring down an instance of netcat and give ourselves a more complete shell. So I'll go ahead and open this. cd var www.html. That's where I keep all my tools at. And then I will just run sudo python 3 http server on port 80. So with that, we've got the server running. We'll be able to pull things down. And I just like to use PowerShell. So PowerShell, invoke web request, and then say the URI is going to be 10, 10, 14, 27. And I'm going to pull down nc.exe. And because it doesn't have the Internet Explorer, doesn't know how to work from command line, you have to give it an out file. So we'll just say nc.exe. Come over here, hopefully it pulls. There you go. So we were successful in pulling netcat. So I'm going to go ahead and open another one here, and that way I get my up, down, left, right, all my arrow keys. I'm going to do arrow wrap. It's just a nice little tool that you can use for netcat to get all the full functionality, or at least more functionality. So yeah. NDLP 9999. When we come back here, we can do NC 10, 10, 14, 27, port 9999, and give me a command.exe. Looks good. We send it off, and you can see it hang. And here we are. Say, who am I again? I am buff Sean. So if I say cd C users now, goes to C users. So we have a fully functioning shell. Just going to take a look, and we do have Sean. So cd Sean, and I'm going to go one step further and say desktop. And on the desktop is user. So type USER.TXT, and we got our user. So getting through to this point is really not that hard. It was just finding that one little clue that told you the application, and then just doing a search for a public exploit. To go to the next step, we've got to take a look at some of the processes that are running on the computer, as well as some of the ports that are available. I have run WinPs on this several times, and there's really not a lot that is super beneficial here. Inside WinPs, you will see what I'm about to show you, which is tasklist, and I'm going to show you netstat. So you're going to be able to take a look at those things and get the information that you need. So we'll start with a task list, and I'll just scroll up, kind of take a look at the processes. These are all fairly normal, a lot of service hosts, msfvenom. Got a couple little server things here, SVC host. You have a MySQL server, so we should be seeing a port 3306 available, more than likely. We'll just keep coming down here. There's a couple command shells, netcats, that's me. And then there's this is a little weird, CloudMe.exe. So we'll take a look at that here in a minute, but let's go to a netstat. So netstat A&L, look for all the listeners. All right, on this box, we see normal Windows processes. We see 8080. We see the MySQL port. One of the issues I've had with demoing this box, and it just seems like it depends on how the box feels. The CloudMe runs on port 8888. And so I don't know if we're still waiting for the service to start up properly. It's got some quirks to it. So you can do this. Find string 8888. So it's still not showing up on the available ports. And so that's a frustration for me in this box. I'll really show you guys how it works. I need, obviously, the port to function. We can see that it was sitting at 18,000 K, so 18 meg, now it's up to 32. So it might be just a part of the process starting up. So yeah, there you go. So now you see it is listening. So it's just, again, it's a quirk of this box, and I really got frustrated. I hate this part of the box. But we're going to try and get this demo to go all the way through this time. So we know that it's listening here, but it's listening on 127.0.0.1. That's localhost. And this is one kind of security mechanism. I'm not going to say that it's at all foolproof, but by keeping things in a localhost only, that means it's only going to listen for connections coming from 127.0.0.1. So that's great. That's a local privilege exploit that we'd be looking for. So let's see what we can find. This is called CloudMe. So we'll just say CloudMe exploit. And sure enough, there's a couple that pop to the top of the list. This one's from 2018, this one's from 2020. Based on the way these boxes are developed, it is more than likely that it's this one. And I don't have a good mechanism for doing enumeration, but we'll go ahead and take a look at this anyways. So with this exploit, the only instructions were to start the service and then run this script. So this script is going to go to 127.0.0.1, so it's a local exploit. So it's going to have some padding on the front, a NOP sled, it's going to have some instructions, and then it's going to run a payload. It's going to put all that in together and do a buffer overflow. Pretty basic. You don't have to do any kind of buffer overflow building. For this, it's been handed to you. You just need to make sure, one, that it works in Python 3. And so we're going to touch on that a little bit. And then two, you got to change the payload. I don't want to just pop calc. Pop calc's not going to work for me. So let's go ahead and bring this down the same way we brought the other one down. We'll view the raw, and then we'll wget that in our window. I need to make a new window. So wget this file, 48389. I'm gonna do the same thing. So 483, we're gonna move it to 483.py. If I try to do a Python 3 right now, you're going to see that it hits a different error. So this one does have a print statement with parentheses, but what it's hitting is sys dot and then exclusion value. Sys is not defined because it was never imported. Let's take a look at that real quick. So nano 483.py. Up at the top in the import statements, they did not include sys. So maybe it's just poorly written. Maybe it's to try to keep people, script kiddies, from using it. But that's all there. Now it's time to make a payload. So with this payload, there's a couple ways to do it. I'm really committed to doing it this other way, which is if I'm going to paste this in here. And I'm going to change the command. I'm going to keep it as an execute, like execute something on the system. What I'm going to tell it to do is c XAMPP HTDocs gem upload, because that's where I put nc.exe. You can use interpreter shells and other Windows reverse shells. Maybe they'll work a little bit better. This one was just kind of an interesting way that I used it, since I can and I have netcat. I'm going to go ahead and run it. It amused me. So in order to do this, we need to give the information of our local IP, so 1427. We're going to give it the port. So I'm going to do this on 443, just because I've been having issues. And I'm going to say give me, so execute command.exe. Put another quote here to close it out. And that should be everything we need to make our payload. Let it run, it's pretty fast here. And we're going to copy this information. Now we want to nano that file again, so 483. Oh. No. I've still got to open in this other pane. All right, so we'll come up here and just delete the payload as is. We'll put our payload in. Now, originally the variable was called payload. We have it as buff because that's the default, but we also have our own versions of buff that are part of this, and we don't want to mess with that too much. So we're going to rename this back over to payload. And the easiest way I found was go to this first line, control / to replace. I'm going to say replace buff with payload. And we're just going to go down and say yes. We don't want to say all because, like I showed you, that is a legitimate variable called buff that uses payload, because payload is part of how it built the buff. So I'm going to say no to that one. I'm going to say no to where it sends that buff. And then I'll say no to that name up there, and that's everything that's there. So we should be good to go. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. All right. And I'm going to put my listener over here. So I'm going to do an RL wrap nc mblp 443. Because it's 443, I've got to run this as sudo. So we are now listening on 443 using an RL wrap. We've got this application built to run But in order to do it, it's got to touch that 8888. So to make that work, we've got to run Plink for this. So Plink is a putty tool that allows you to do port forwarding. So I'm going to, I don't like it here, I'm going to do it back one file. So the desktop, I'm going to go to download. Downloads. All right. And see here you see CloudMe 112. So that is some enumeration to say it is CloudMe 112 or 1112.exe for 1.11.2. So we have confirmation that this is the right exploit that we're looking for. Here I'm going to do a PowerShell. I'm going to invoke web request again, do a URI 10.10.14.27, and then I'm going to pull down Plink.exe, and then I will put it here in Plink.exe. Give it a second to pull. Somewhere around here, there we go. That's where our server's at. I'll just give it a moment to think. Things are running a little slow in this box. And there it goes. And it finishes up its process. We're going to do dir. We see that Plink is there now. So we can do a Plink port forward. So we'll say Plink. And then you have to specify what kind of service you're using. So SSH, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that port, forward it back to me on SSH. To do that, I'm going to say I want to run a reverse. Or I'm going to say we're going to run a remote 8888.127.0.0.1. So anything that comes in on 8888 is now going to be directed to the 127.0.0.1 So we'll be able to localize what we're doing. Now the way that HackTheBox has redesigned some of its SSH protocols, they don't want folks going from the operational boxes back to the 14 network using port 22 because people can easily just try cali on port 22 for anybody in the 14 domain. So they're just trying to make it a little bit more difficult. Please change your username, change your password, and change your port. And do it often, that way that you can protect your box. So for today, I'm running on 2222. I did make a user called test. And all that information should be good. I'm going to say yes. It's going to reach back to my box. I'm going to say yes, store that key. And then for this, today's password is going to be buffSSH. So now, if I come over to my box and I say netstat ant up, I am listening on 127.0.0.1 on port 8888. So that listener is built in, and that listener is going to redirect to the other box. So we're good there. I have my 444 or my 443 listener, and it should be on this box 443 e command exe. So my listener is good to go. The only thing I've got to do is Python 3. And it's right there, 48389. Run it. And I do not get my shell back. So I just prayed to the demo gods again because I have been having a heck of a time. So I'm going to take a look at this one more time, and one of the things that I've tried in the past is just to do forward slashes. And that's just the intricacy of how these things are built. So we've got forward slashes. It's still going to 443. So we'll run that. And we'll take this payload and try and drop it in. It's a slightly different payload, but we'll follow the same procedures. So I'm gonna nav it. delete what we've got here. Paste this in, and then rename all this. That's weird. I don't even know. I guess I didn't copy enough here, so let's do that. Buff to payload. We'll save that. All right. So we'll come back over here and we will run this. Clean it up real quick for you. 443. I've still got my port forward on. So we will run this application and we get a shell back. So if I say, who am I? We are administrator now, yay. All right. So we're gonna go to cd users administrator desktop. And when we look in there, we have a root.txt. So if I just say type root.txt, we are successful. This box, it was quirky. I've been successful at this box plenty, and I still had issues doing this. So if you run into issues, please put comments in below. I'll help you work through it. Hit me up on any of these social media. But this was rated rather low. I had it up earlier. Yeah, it was rated a 3.6 by the community. I think a little bit because it was easy, but also because it ran into some snags based on that CloudMe service crashing. And that's just a function of this box. So I just want to say thank you everyone for coming out today. I totally appreciate your time. I had a good time doing this. I love showing people things like porting 2.7 Python over to 3 just to get the basics down. Doing a port forward is something that you need to get the hang of, especially if you start doing things like Dante, trying to dig into Windows boxes in the middle of a domain and trying to port forward. You're not going to be able to do it with SSH and some of the other tools that you would do with netcat, maybe, but bash redirects, things like that. You're just not going to be able to do that. So it's important to understand Plink and get a little bit more familiar with it. And then here we got to practice a little bit of those issues with trying to make a Venom payload. If I had gone with something more like a normal shell, this never would have happened. So something to keep in mind. But sometimes it is a tool set that you might need if it's a very customized exe exploit that you've got to run. Things like that, just keep it in mind. As always, I'd like to thank Egotistical Sean Wharton. Did a great job in this box. He's the one heading up all the Dante stuff. Definitely a lot of easier level stuff, but it's great for anybody that's a newcomer to the community. Go check his stuff out. Check this box out. It's not too bad. I hope you guys have a great week. I hope to see you again next week, but it is in America Thanksgiving, so we never know what's going to happen. I hope everybody has a great week. Stay safe, stay inside, wear your masks, all that fun stuff. Catch you next time.